whenever you leave America and you go to Mexico, at least when it's me, there is a little bit of a heartbeat. You know, you recognize that you're in a wilder, less safe place. Yeah. And I asked a lot of questions when I was down there, and I had a trip to Colombia this year where they reversed things rather dramatically. And I wondered if you have any thoughts at all about what could possibly, because it sounds like one of the problems is that the judges are the jury. There are no juries in Mexico, so the judges can be corrupt. And that as long as you have no rule of law, how can they ever win?
Yeah, you know, obviously Cartel Land is not a policy film, and, you know, there's no talking heads, there's no experts, there's no, you know, so...
Right or wrong.
Right or wrong. But it's a multifactorial problem with many different parts to it. I mean, at its heart is what you said, is that, you know, there's no rule of law, and, you know, that's part of what fascinated me in making this film, is sort of what happens when government institutions fail. What happens when people live in a society where they have no one to protect them? You know, the very institutions that we take for granted aren't there. Or if they are there, they're working in collusion with the cartels. And that's why movements like this rise up. That's why the auto defenses rose up. That's why we see movements all across the world today rising up in similar ways, and we have seen throughout history, and we will continue to see throughout our future. But, you know, the biggest part of the problem is us. You know, we're consuming the drugs that are the basis for this war, that are the basis for this violence. We are funding this war through our consumption of drugs, and sending money and guns south. And so...
So the war supposedly started when we started just, you know, the war against drugs. That was the beginning of it, that we started it.
Yeah, and, you know, I'm not a historian, so I can't speak as an expert in this matter. But, you know, as we've sort of militarized the border, we've done a good job of sort of blocking, you know, big cities like San Diego and El Paso. But what that's done is push most of the drugs and the immigrants into the desert, which is much more dangerous for especially the migrants come across. You know, thousands of migrants die every year of dehydration and other factors coming through areas that we see in the film. So
it does look like the Wild West, though, I have to say.
It feels like the Wild West. I mean, even on the Arizona side, you know, you're on American soil, but you do feel like you're in this sort of Wild West. I mean, the town had, you know, like 15 people. You know, you rarely saw any law enforcement. You know, as you see in the film, you look up on the mountaintops and there's cartel scouts watching you. You can hear them talking about you on the radio. So obviously, you know, this is not an exact parallel between these two characters, and the violence in Mexico is much more visceral and real. I mean, there's, you know, between 80 and 100,000 people that have been killed since 2007 in Mexico. 25,000 plus people disappeared in Mexico. And, you know, we're not seeing that violence in the US. We're not seeing that violence in Arizona. So that fight on the Arizona side is much more sort of theoretical. It's much more of a fear that these Mexican drug wars will seep their way across our border.